This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by Isotope, Native Instruments, Atom Audio, and SAE Institute Nashville. You're hearing my voice right now mixed through Isotope, RX, Ozone, and Neutron on Atom Audio monitors and headphones. Please check out our awesome sponsors using the links in the show notes below, and like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and leave us a comment. It's a great way for you to help support this show. Now get ready to rock.
All the musicians would come in, and rather than us needing to be like, oh, this is going to be so cool later on, we know what it's like to be in the studio with good musicians. We're creative people. These are, the whole joy of being in the studio, especially when you're making sort of jazz or world adjacent music that involves improv, is like the music doesn't really exist until the people play it. And when you get people at this level, they can react so fast. It's instantaneous. And their ability to react to it, and then more importantly, to play into it, to immediately be like, this would be awesome. And I'm just sitting there being like, oh my gosh. And this happened day upon day upon day. And that's how records are made, right? Like the records are not just a producer bossing people around telling what to do. That's not the vibe. It's about getting good people in the room and sort of letting it happen, letting it flow. And the ability for people to hear it in real time, I don't think it could have happened any other way.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Dreaming of a career in audio or the entertainment business? SAE Institute Nashville, in the heart of Music Row, offers hands-on programs where you'll learn on professional-grade gear with industry pros, learning through real projects, not just lectures. Explore studio production, live sound, audio for film, and a whole lot more. Or take the entertainment business program to learn about contracts, promotion, and more. With diploma, associate, and bachelor's programs, there's a path for you. Book a tour today at nashville.sae.edu or call 615-244-5848. Howdy, Rockstars. It's your host, Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Justin Gray, an award-winning producer, mixing, and mastering engineer based in Toronto, Canada. Justin is a leader in immersive audio music production, working with artists, producers, and labels worldwide to bring their music to life in Dolby Atmos and Sony 360 reality audio. He's worked across a wide range of musical styles with artists like Snoop Dogg, Olivia Rodrigo, Brandy, Carlos Santana, Arkells, The Sheepdogs, Valley, Mother, Jan Arden, Black Bear, Christina Perri, Orville Peck, and many, many more. Justin runs his own studio, Justin Gray Sound and Immersive Mixing, one of the first Dolby Atmos and Sony 360 RA certified music studios in Canada. He's also a faculty member at Humber College, where he teaches audio production, composition, and music performance. Thanks so much to my brother from another podcast, Matt Boudreau at Working Class Audio, for making our introduction. Please welcome Justin Gray to Recording Studio Rockstars. Justin, are you ready to rock, dude?
I am ready. Thanks so much, Lidge.
I would hope so. We bent over backwards to try and get everything hooked up for this interview. I know sometimes doing interviews for the podcast are full of challenges, like trying to get the video and the audio and everything. So thanks for going through all that. So we can see this beautiful studio you're in and this awesome mic that you've got in front of you. Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So this is your first time here, man. So I'd love to kind of start at the beginning with you and just get a better idea of, who you are. Maybe you can give us, you've done an incredible list of albums and mixing credits and everything. And then I know you're working on an amazing project now and have established yourself as a real leader in the immersive mixing space. But clearly you didn't start out that way. So maybe give us the brief arc of getting interested in music and getting to this point where you're doing all this great work now.
Absolutely. So my musical journey outside of, learning music in school here in Toronto as a kid really begins picking up bass so I could join my friends in a Rage Against the Machine cover band.
Nice.
Yeah. Bass was the available instrument. I'm like a classic, hey, I want to join the band. They're like, okay, well, you can play bass. My dad's got a bass. I still have that lovely Fender, but my friend's dad eventually let me have. And so, yeah, I got into music and playing bass. And, honestly, as a bassist, I mean, I've still considered myself a professional bassist. And up until about sort of pre-COVID, I was gigging a lot. And definitely for a good 15 years of my career in Toronto, being a professional instrumentalist as a bass player, playing in all sorts of musical styles. I did go through college as a bass player as well. So I graduated with a degree in sort of jazz and contemporary music performance.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I came up that way and really came into the music industry as a performer, played, toured, recorded, the whole deal. At the same time, I was always obsessed with the recording side of things. And 20 years ago, it's a totally different landscape for sort of a non-studio owner to be doing it. So I'm right there at the very first M-Box when that became available. It basically changed what was possible, not at a professional level, but at least on a getting Pro Tools together and starting to record my own music, starting to use it as a compositional tool, as a editing tool. And I just sort of came up through all the various ranks of it, starting as just working on my own things, then eventually figuring out how to edit. I
think I still have my original M-Box, the first
I still have
version. It's got a piece of orange duct tape kind of holding it together still.
It was a beautiful little thing, right? I mean, I would walk around my laptop in the M-Box and record rehearsals or record whatever I could and record demos of songs, anything that could happen with just a pair of microphones. And eventually, as a bassist, I started to find myself in sort of the role of producing records with a lot of folks here in Toronto. A lot of that is within the jazz community and sort of world music community, which means, there's a lot of musicians from around the world here and worked in that community for my entire career. And so I would be playing on the project, but then also my sort of interest on the studio side of things would be, okay, well, let me help edit this project. And eventually, become a producer and be in the mix studios, sitting there mixing the records alongside the, mix engineers. And eventually, with a whole bunch of those projects, I just kept wanting to be more and more involved, bring a sonic imprint to them and started mixing them. So, initially pretty entry-level projects and projects I was producing that had lower budgets and, we needed to pull everything together to make those records happen. And so I started building my studio around being able to do those things like editing and mixing. That naturally led to having lots of microphones and bringing people over. And so I feel like it's just like this total one step at a time journey to eventually building a studio for the first time, which was in the basement of my house at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And, treating it the best I could, having folks come over to do overdubs, even just recording full bands in the room, like whatever it took. Fast forward that a little bit. Eventually I found myself in the position of building a nicer studio, the one that maybe we'll get a chance to look at some photos later. I'm not sitting in it right now, but...
Yeah, you're in a nice studio right now, but I think it's a friend's studio, right?
Yeah, this is a good friend of mine named Robbie Grunwald. This is his studio in Toronto called Raven Tape. And so, yeah, eventually I built my studio and I built it around the art of mastering. And that's because about a decade ago, a little bit before that, but about a decade ago, I found myself in a position to want to enter into that practice. And the reason is just how my obsession with sound. And I think over the course of all of those things I described, the one thing there is like my obsession with just the finite details of sound.
Mm-hmm.
Mastering is, a beautiful way to engage with music that way. And so I started to learn and I started to develop and take some sort of consulting sessions and being around mastering engineers. And I just started trying it. And I found myself immediately clicking with that mindset. It really just was something that just made sense. And I feel like even the community around me was like, hey, you're doing really good at this. And projects started to sort of come. And I'd say during that time, I really have phased out performance, phased out even producing and mixing as much as I was doing, and really just dedicated myself and my studio towards stereo mastering, which I still am, doing on a daily basis. And maybe I won't give it all away because we'll probably get into that. But then about 7 years ago is where the whole immersive side of things also begins as the sort of next evolution of this long journey from being a bassist to eventually, working on records in both stereo and immersive formats.
Yeah. So the immersive stuff has been how many years now? Has it been a decade?
Yeah, about a decade. About a decade since I really started working in surround. But realistically, other than the film world, Atmos wasn't really a thing until about 8 years ago. That was the very, very inception of it from a music standpoint. And realistically, from a commercial standpoint, we're still talking only about 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, yeah. And so prior to that, what was the time frame in working in traditional stereo for you?
Yeah, so I mean, stereo is 2 decades at this point between all of those practices. But along the way, I got really obsessed with 5.1, honestly, mostly as a listener. I love movies. I love film soundtracks. I got a Wicked SACD and DVD-A collection, if anyone knows.
I love that you just said Wicked. I'm from Boston, so.
All right. Okay. Does that mean that we both share
that means
Wicked?
we speak a Wicked great language.
Okay, awesome. So I have a Wicked SACD and DVD-A collection of surround discs. And so I set my studio up to be in 5.1, honestly, with no work. I had some folks who I would consult. I would do some work for prepping some film scores. I have some good friends who are good film composers, so I'd do a little bit of like stem prep in 5.1, but it never really took off as a legitimate sort of career path. But I just was continually experimenting with it, listening, being an audiophile, and then occasionally taking my own records and messing around with it. So it was already in there, like well over a decade ago, but I didn't really have an into any way to commercialize that skill, unless I maybe had tried to pursue the film side, of course. But I'm pretty obsessed with the music world, so that's where I wanted to stay. Right. And so when I got the Whispers of Atmos, which was attending AES conferences, when the very first disc, I think is 2015, where the first music project was released on Blu-ray in Atmos, I was like, it just clicked. I got obsessed with the concept. I started researching. I started calling all my film friends, asking them about how it works. And they're like, oh, do you want to work on the film side? I'm like, nope. Like, well, why are you asking these questions?
And so you were going to AES meetings, a local chapter up in Toronto?
And also New York. Yeah.
New York. Oh, you'd go down to the ones in New York?
Exactly, yeah. So the annual one in New York was the one. And so, yeah, I just, the very concept that it might even come into the music sphere was enough to just drive me crazy, and eventually start building the 714 setup that I started with. And so that's about, from the sort of time of thinking I wanted to build, an immersive studio, which means adding height channels. And from the Dolby Atmos side, that means having 7 speakers and then an LFE and 4 height channels. That, especially when there's no income or no jobs, like that took a couple of years. I mean, sure, you get the speakers, then you got to get the stands, then you got to get the converters, and then it's the cables, and it's the cables that are the nastiest of it all.
Oh, that's funny. We were just talking about cabling on a previous episode with Trace Audio. Yeah. So it's just that reminder. It's one thing to get the piece of gear for your studio. It's another thing to get it hooked up and working in your workflow.
Absolutely. You got to rethink. When I designed the studio, I didn't think about where height channels would be, so I've got to think about power. I mean, it's so many factors. Yeah. And I was on my own doing it, so that took a little while, and by about 2017, I was in a position where it's like I could play back music in the format, I could open Pro Tools and sort of start experimenting with it. And my goal at that point, honestly, there wasn't a great career plan. It was more of a creative plan of like, this has to happen somehow, some way. I feel like I just want to express music this way.
I think that's the critical part of what we do too. It's true to me coming at this as a musician first. I'm motivated by the desire to create music, you know, and doing it through production, through the studio, through the instruments, through mixing also and everything. And I think this might be the year that I start diving into Atmos finally. But I've also had guests on the show like Jamie Tate, who came into it from the lover of records first, you know, doing that. But I agree, you know, it's cool to hear you describe it. It's like that drive to just do this thing creatively. It's, we've talked about this a little on the podcast too. There's also the version of it in our youth. It's like the ignorance of youth, the enthusiasm, will get us through things that just don't make sense. And then we get to the other side of this, you know, mountain, and now we've got all this knowledge and skill, and and then when the opportunities come along, we actually know what to do with them and stuff like that. And you're just triggering all those thoughts by saying that.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, there's something so beautiful about, if I go back to being a bassist, you know, from the age of about 12 to 18, before going, you know, deciding that I would go to university and pursue this as a career. I mean, that's when the deepest part of our musicianship is built, right? That's where you're like at a 7-hour band practice playing Rage Against the Machine songs on repeat with no other expectations from it other than joy, wanting to improve, wanting to find a way to connect with it, even if you can't, right? It's like you're trying to play the part, but you can't quite do it. But there's no audience. It's just you and your friends and the music. And it's during that time that we develop really important, deep habits and deep sort of like emotional connectivity to it. So I hadn't thought about it quite the way you described, but totally. That's what, you know, 2017 starts. Realistically, in 2019 is when Tidal took on Atmos for the first time. And that was like the first time where a streaming company said, you know what, we're going to try to share immersive audio formats in a non-physical format. It's a big deal. Nothing happened. So, you know, I remember going into my wife, who had obviously, you know, if you start bringing in this much gear, and it's not a small thing, like it's like you go into a room and you've got that many speakers, and you're like, whoa, what's that? Even my friends, you know, my musician friends are like, wow, that's a lot. That's 10 more speakers than you normally are working with. Like, it's not
I just got my studio remodeled, working with Carl Tatz, a studio designer here in Nashville.
Amazing.
And he did an incredible job, and the, you know, stereo sounds like nothing I've ever heard in my studio. And then I came back from NAMM and I was like, all right, man, what do I got to do a you know, an Atmos thing? He's like, well, let's just take what you did and, you know, add 12 more or whatever it was. And I was like, oh, that is a lot of, that's a lot of commitment. It's kudos to you, man. I mean, you know, it sounds like you're also driven by the interest in it going way back to surround and film and everything.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's a creative palette. And I think from the very first time I started hearing it, it immediately affected me on a personal level as to just how I think about music. Even when I'm working in stereo, like that feeling, right? Like oftentimes I'd say in the musical styles I'm working on, I work on a lot of musical styles as a mastering engineer, but I do get a chance to work with a lot of acoustic music, jazz music, classical music, sort of world-oriented musics, or like hybrid acoustic musics, where like, you know, we're really trying to create that sense of being totally enveloped in something, whether it's 2 speakers, 1 speaker, 12 speakers. And so I think once I heard it just with orchestral music, just actually physically happening, it's not something that I could ever, it's not something I could ever forget. And it was just like sort of embedded in my sort of musical sense, I guess.
Native Instruments supercharges your music production with Complete 15 featuring Contact 8 new machine hardware integration and cutting-edge synths, samples, and effects. Contact 8 now gives you the chords and phrases tool for instant inspiration, the Leap tool for dynamic looping, and Conflux, a hybrid instrument for blending organic and synth textures. Plus, Machine 3.0 is here, giving you seamless control over Native Instruments gear and the latest NKS-supported hardware. Use the code ROCK10 for 10% off at nativeinstruments.com. Well, we might as well take a look. I mean, the next question would be, tell us about your studio, but I've actually got a great image that I stole. I had to jump through a couple of hoops, but I think I figured out how to pull it from your website so I could reshare it here. Let's take a look at it and see.
There it is.
If you can show us around a little bit. And I'll see if I can zoom it all. I wonder if I can shrink it. Oh, well, I don't know how to make it any smaller. Let me see if I can maybe make the toolbar. Did that make it smaller? That made it a tiny bit smaller.
Yeah, that's all right.
All right, so this is your studio, right? And
correct.
I think I can zoom in so we can kind of look at different things.
Perfect.
But that is, we're not even seeing all the speakers. That's the beauty about it. How do you even take a photograph of an Atmos room?
It is not easy.
Right?
So my cousin, Sean O'Neill, is a great photographer. I think if you visit the website, the photos are quite beautiful on the whole.
Yeah.
And he's really tall. He's like 6'4", and he is up trying his very best to get that framed, and it is not an easy thing to do. And we've tried a couple of times, but in terms of going on a quick little tour, from a speaker standpoint, of course, there's a lot more going on there. But we have our LCR, which is, our left, center, right speakers.
Left, center, right there, right?
And these are all Lipinski L707s. Actually, there's one of them behind me here as well right now. And so the L707s are a sort of a two-way passive speaker, mastering level speaker, very full range, exceptional fidelity. And they were my stereo speakers. I mean, you know how it is. Once you find a pair of speakers that you totally connect with and you work for years and years and years. Mm-hmm. When I wanted to build out the immersive side, I was like, well, I'd like them to all be the same speakers. I'd like to be able to work at a sort of mastering level in whatever formats I'm working in. So they're all the same on that layer. So then what we have, if we continue, let's say go from the left speaker and we'll go around in a circle. Mm-hmm. So that's our left wide. No, the one more. That's our left wide surround. So when we start to talk about 7.1 or 9.1, that's the 9 aspect. So that, of course, is mirrored on the other side. So those are our wide surrounds. Now the one beside that, on the that's the right.
And then
wide.
there's this. This would be the side.
Correct, and those are at 90 degrees, sort of faced in towards where I'd be sitting.
Might have to zoom myself a little on my own screen here so I can see everything. All right, go ahead, continue.
Then our next speaker is sort of tucked away there in the photo, right? But tucked away on the left and the right, we see a little red just poking out. Not the
right
rear
here.
ones.
Right. Okay. And so we need to do the audio only listeners a favor and sort of really verbalize what we're looking at and describing.
Absolutely. So let's do this. So we start in our front. We're faced towards the speaker. We have our center channel. And we have our left and right. That's 3. Then you have our
left and right would be like if you're mixing stereo. Yep. That would be your left and right.
Yeah. When I'm working on stereo, those are my speakers right there. Mm-hmm. So then next to those are our left wide and right wide surround speakers. Which is
just it's just a little further out than the left and the right, pretty much.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. If exactly.
Is there an angle from your mixing position that you would turn to look at the left wide and right wide?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I'm going to rough it in for folks, but if we look, if you start to think about it in sort of more equal rather than the super precise version, it's like, well, if we talk about a speaker at 30 degrees and then our next side surround speakers at 90, well, halfway between those, roughly, is where we have that. So it's
okay.
It's not exactly that, but I think that helps to visualize it.
Somewhere near 60 or something like that. Or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then as we continue, the blonde colored speakers, the two blonde ones in this photo, those are our rear surrounds. And those are behind me at 130 degrees and the opposite on the other side. And so
they're a mirror of the left, right up front, but behind us?
Virtually. They're a little bit, because we look at a circle, they can be, they're a little more flexible. They could literally be like a quad setup, like actually the same. Sometimes we do move them a little further, so they're slightly more behind us. And in my case, they are, and that's because of the two other speakers here, which makes, so on this main layer, there are 11 speakers. So,
wow.
and so what that means is I have 11, and what the extra two are is they're actually combined with my side surround speaker. So when I'm preparing music for film, for cinematic, the rules change with immersive audio, with Atmos, and suddenly, rather than this discrete channel situation that we're describing, speakers in movie theaters are combined into what are called arrays. And so in a movie theater, you could have a whole wall of speakers, and basically they add speakers to fill in gaps. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you have a 38-channel bed. What they do is they combine speakers into groups of speakers, almost like live arrays. And so it does change things when you're preparing stuff for film and for cinematic release. And so I have been able, this is basically the most speakers I could possibly and logistically fit in the studio.
Yeah.
So that's 11 on the main layer.
So I'm going to verbalize that for our listeners too. So there's a side speaker on the left and a side speaker on the right. And then behind us are the left, right, rear, or however they're described. And then in the same way that we had a wide left and a wide right, there's sort of another one that's between the sides and the rears.
Exactly.
And that's what you were just describing, right? And that one only comes into play for the film mixing. Exactly.
And so I think of this as pixelation in a lens or a screen. When we talk about screen resolution, is the more speakers within reason, and it's space, of course, the more precise the spatial information that's being heard as an engineer is. And when we talk about this format, Atmos specifically, being an object-based format, the very short version of this is, even though we're working with all these speakers, the master file itself is actually an adaptive file at its source, at its core. And therefore, there is sort of no single speaker version of it. It's this digital cube that needs to adapt to whatever the listener's experiencing. So when I'm working as a mixing engineer or a mastering engineer in the format, I want to have as much fidelity as possible to benefit the translation. And, it's like working on brilliant mastering speakers in a beautiful mastering room for stereo. If you can hear it all, the hope is that even if you hear it on a phone or a car or a pair of headphones or whatever, that the translation's going to be there because you were able to deal with the full frequency range, beautiful imaging, and sort of pick everything out. And so that's the philosophy behind having that many speakers in my setup is.
By the way, our buddy Brundle the Fly has joined us in the studio again, so you may see him. There you go. He's coming to say hi. Okay, amazing. Well, let me go back because this is like looking at a Christmas tree, looking at your studio.
Yeah.
So there's more stuff that we should ask you about. So if we zoom in more, like what's all this fun stuff that you get to work with down here? You did a clever thing that I haven't seen before too. Oh, is that one big curved screen that goes behind the center speaker, or is it two screens?
It's two screens.
Yeah, I thought that was clever.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, I always thought it was like, I'm always like, well, what do you do? How do you look at the screen in front of you if you get the speaker right in your face too?
It's an age-old problem. Now, I'm happy to describe this gear, but to keep to close the gap on the speaker side, we still do have our ceiling speakers. and our subwoofers. So should we finish that story and then get into the gear?
Good call.
So we're looking at 6 height channels. We have our, basically a pair of height channels that are in front of us, a pair of height channels that are directly above us, and a pair of height channels that are behind us, all faced in towards, that center listening position. So what this means is that we have 11 on the main layer, 6 on the top layer, and there's 2 more speakers in the studio that you can't see in this image because they're just under the desk, like beside the left-right speakers, which are my subwoofers. And in the Atmos format, we have something called an LFE, which is a low-frequency effects channel. It's a dedicated speaker send where you can send low-frequency content. So if you're in the movie theater and the elephants start walking or the explosions start to happen, that's where that rumble is being generated from, is those big speakers. So what we have is 11 on the main layer, 0.1, which is that subwoofer, 0.6, which is our top 6 speakers.
Okay. So Rockstars, what Justin is saying is if you need to take a bathroom break during the middle of the movie, it's Justin's fault because he put something in the LFE, right?
Yeah, or somebody did it. And it's always there, especially if you go see a nice action film or a big sort of dramatic film, that LFE is being used for intensity.
Yeah, a good example in my experience was the time I went to go see Jurassic Park, but it came to our drive-in movie theater. So we had the little clip-in speaker that clipped into our window, and we're watching, or maybe I was sitting outside, but I'm watching the movie, and all of a sudden, and it's great, and everything sounds great, good enough. And then all of a sudden it cuts to this scene where there's just a little puddle of water on the ground, and ripples are shaking on it. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, what the hell's going on? I don't hear anything. Like, why are they looking at ripples on this puddle? And if we had had that LFE channel during that viewing experience, I would have truly understand what that was all about.
Exactly. That's a great visualization. So yeah, it is a lot of speakers. It is an obsessive amount of speakers.
Well, I'm glad that you obsessed over it because your Atmos mixes sound amazing. So a reminder, Rockstars, we have a playlist of Justin's music to listen to in the show notes. You should be able to click through. It's going to be an Apple Music playlist, and it's all immersive. Justin, do you want to explain to anybody how they should make sure that they're actually hearing the immersive mix when they go play the Apple Music playlist?
Absolutely. So let's start with the headphone side, is if you've got a iPhone, iPad, or appropriate level laptop, one of the newer ones, and you're in Apple Music, you go to the preferences and you can select spatial audio or Dolby Atmos on or off. There are 3 settings. There's always on, automatic, and always off. The always on means that if you are listening with the appropriate device and there's an Atmos version available, it will play. Mm-hmm. Automatic is especially useful on an iPhone because if you can visualize this, if you swipe down and you hold down the bar where you have the volume, you'll be able to get the ability to turn on stereo or Atmos in real time and sort of toggle between them. I don't know. It's a pretty distracting way to listening to music, but if you are so inclined, you could do it.
I think it's great at the beginning. It really helped me understand always on, always off. For some reason, that reminds me of Silicon Valley when they're tossing the toy up in the air. But when you do that, you can kind of train yourself. Okay, now I hear stereo versus Atmos. At the beginning, I felt like I really needed to understand, like, what was I hearing?
Right. And so now the one and then of course there's always off if someone wanted to ensure that they were only hearing the stereo version.
Right. Or like the original mix of a classic record or something like that.
Exactly. So let's go into a scenario where you're in always in automatic. If you're using a pair of Apple headphones, so let's say AirPod Pro 2s or AirPod Pros or AirPod Maxes, or like one of the brands that has got this sort of official Apple badge. Now what's happening is your Apple device is communicating with those headphones and engaging with the spatial audio algorithm. And what that allows for is hearing Apple's spatial representation of an Atmos mix for headphones. It's a virtualized headphone experience of an Atmos mix that I've delivered. And so, yeah, I like the idea of being in automatic, where you could toggle between the two and get an experience of where one is different. And I think that's a great learning experience. If by chance you just really love how it sounds, like myself, you put it in always on, and that means if it's available in Atmos, it's going to play. But you will always see, it'll say Dolby Atmos if an Atmos is playing, or it'll say lossless if stereo is playing.
Yeah. Right. Okay, cool. At iZotope, mixing just got even smarter. Introducing the new iZotope Catalyst series, Plasma, Aurora, and Cascadia, designed to transform your sound with intelligent processing for dynamically precise saturation, reverb, and delay. Plus, Neutron now features 3 new modules and an upgraded AI-powered mix assistant to help you get killer mixes with ease. Use the secret code ROCK10 to get 10% off the Catalyst series, Neutron, RX, or any of iZotope's incredible plugins at iZotope.com. If we don't have, we do also, maybe you said this, but if we just have regular old headphones in our studio and we plug into our studio computer, audio out the interface, we can still turn on the Dolby Atmos and hear the Atmos version in regular headphones. You don't have to have the AirPod Pros and all that.
Correct. At that point, what is happening is we have to put it in always on. There's no automatic. That's one of the features that's lost, which makes toggling between them a little clunkier, right? You got a 2 or 3 second gap between them, and it's not as fun. What you're doing at that point is you're hearing a version which is actually a Dolby binaural. Mm-hmm. And not to get too nerdy on it, but nevertheless, Apple's spatial headphone virtualization of an Atmos mix will sound slightly different than Dolby's spatialization for headphones in their own binaural algorithm. Again, as I said with this whole translation thing, is we enter a whole new paradigm of what a master file is when we talk about object-based audio. The entire paradigm shifts because there is no single central version. Now, I like to think of it as the speaker render, right? As much as any other engineer, we would all say that the 714 or the 916 or whatever, that's the master. And I do agree with it, but at the end of the day, the file itself is meant to adapt. And so if you put in normal headphones, you're going to hear Dolby's algorithm for virtualizing that for headphones. But it's still, it's still all Atmos, and it still is meant to be, a representation of the envelopment that happens in speakers.
Yeah, interesting. So it's like a moving goalpost a little bit, which in a way music always was, because
Absolutely.
You never really knew what somebody was going to be listening to something on.
Absolutely. The one aspect that is slightly different here, like one more layer of the goalpost moving, is that the algorithm that is binauralizing or virtualizing things for headphones can change. And that's wild. So,
right.
and
so
it
it's
does
changing the mix.
Well,
kind of.
It's changing the filter that the mix goes through prior to the listener hearing it. That's what it is. The mix is the mix. The mix never changes, right? If I create it for speakers, realistically, it should play back on any similar speaker system, much more like stereo. It's like, well, if you work on these speakers, they might be a bit brighter. These speakers are a bit darker, but we're all the same phenomenon as stereo exists, just more speakers. And that's why I think we consider the speaker version as the primary master, and I agree with that philosophy. But since headphones is an undeniable part of this ecosystem, right? Like as an engineer, I don't get to say, no, you only get to hear my speaker version. That's not how this works.
Right.
That's the promise. The whole promise of object-based audio, the whole promise of Atmos is that someone can listen to it on this playlist that we're discussing, and they can have a version for them. And so I think it is only appropriate to respect that and to really honor that headphone mix for so many reasons. But
does it technically fold down to mono?
No. I would say it's still, I think of it as a stereo format in that it is a left and a right version, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we go to headphones, it's a stereo version that is using various virtualization tools like equalization, phase, and time delay to mimic and trick the brain into experiencing spatiality.
Right.
And that's, we can consider it like a filter. And so think of it this way: if we took a photo, well, we have our photo, but then if I deliver it to you one day and Apple's decided that this is the filter, and then the next day it changed the colors like just a little bit. Well, at the end of the day, that filter is sort of like spatial audio, sort of like binaural. They have changed since I started, and they will change again. And that's a wild concept to sort of try to wrangle, especially from the mastering mindset, which is like, we're talking about 0.1 dB decisions that were made for this very specific reason, but the filter could change by 0.5 in a way that I never thought about. And so it's, I don't take that as a negative. I just take it as it's important to now understand that our concept of translation and our concept of delivery is changing when we work in this format.
Yeah. Well, and it's probably going to get a whole lot more interesting in the future too. I mean, it's probably we're going to find ourselves in like, Apple Pro, or what do they call them? Vision Pro.
Yep.
What are the big goggles? Vision Pro.
Yeah. Vision Pro.
Yeah. Vision Pro. And we'll just be walking around the room to decide which instrument we want to hear more of anyway, Exactly.
And I mean, these are all creative outlets, right? At the end of the day, I think it's important to remember the technology and art, they've always been in this sort of teeter-totter relationship. The tape machine, think of what that did to music. The microphone, think of what that did to music. The digital audio, conversion, think of what that did to music. It's the technology comes, and then artistry catches up, and then artistry pushes. And so we're certainly at a time right now where in many more spheres than music, technology is racing. Mm-hmm. But I'm still of a mind that after about 5 years of the sort of, community as a whole being really invested into immersive, I was in it for longer, and there's lots of engineers who were in it for longer as well. But for the most part, we're talking about a half a decade worth of, the whole industry getting on board. There's been incredible progress, and there's been a lot of the artists being engineers and creators and everywhere in between, wrangling this technology and then being like, no, this is how it serves the music. And that's what matters.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to get into the very way that you as an artist have been creating for this too. But before we do, let me do one more screen share with you, and let's take a look, because Atmos is not the only way to get sound all around you these days. And it's always amazing to me to see, something like what you've done, which is, not only were you fearless about saying, I can figure this Atmos thing out, you're like, I'll also figure out the other version of it, which is Sony 360. So there's another page on your website here, which I'm sharing now, which shows your 360 setup.
Yep.
Which looks like you even were let me see. I think you have got great photos down here.
I do.
Is this where it is, where it really shows what it looks like? Yeah, look at that, Rockstars. That's amazing. And like you... Did you take another room in your studio and say, I'm going to make this 360 room? It looks like it.
It looks like it, but it's just the back half of the studio. So,
no way.
So here's, sort of story time is, again, I was in the immersive, I was working in Atmos about as early as most folks, certainly in it for many years prior to when Apple takes it on, which is, of course, when it really starts to explode. Amazon also takes it on at that time. And so I continue to do a lot of work with a lot of major labels around the world. Very grateful to do so. Columbia is one of the record labels, and so they're a big subsidiary of Sony. Mm-hmm. And Sony 360 got announced. I think it first made it in a press release around 2020, early 2021, something like that. And so I took note, being the obsessive person that I am, and that I'm genuinely interested in immersive audio as a whole. I started researching it, following it. And then one day I get a call from folks I was working with at Columbia. They're like, okay, here's a record. And who it, actually, if you zoom up on that page, maybe I'll get there first, but,
I'm gonna have to
yeah, if you zoom down, I'll tell you which one was the first 360 mix I did. Go up to the top of that.
Up on the top of the credits.
Yeah, go down. It's Chloe. That's what it is. It's the third one. So third row.
Sorry.
And Mercy, that's the tune. Chloe is the artist and Mercy's the tune. So they're like, okay, we want the Atmos. By the way, do you do Sony 360? And there are these moments in life where you just say, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And I knew about it. I knew what it was. It wasn't, but anyways, it was like, great. Can we have this in the Atmos tomorrow? Like, uh-oh, what have I done? Now, I have since talked to the other folks because there's a much smaller group of people who work sort of at a high level in the 360 world. Everyone's story is very similar to this. There was Dolby did a huge rollout with educational platforms, and there was like a lot of onboarding. Sony came in, they're like, this is happening now. So at that point, I think there's like Blackbird. There was one in London. I can't remember the name right. It might have been Metropolis. There's definitely Sony's lot in LA. I think Battery in New York. A couple studios that Sony sort of outfitted for their specific speaker system. So anyways, when you understand more about the technology, you can certainly listen to it in an Atmos array, but you're not supposed to. I mean, ideally, you're going to work in a different speaker array. So I get it all together. I figure it out. I mix it in the system. I, go through and have a real long night, let's call it, or at least a couple of nights. And then eventually I'm like, okay, this is fine. Delivery of this format is a special task. So I call someone who's now a very close friend and the head of the Sony system. I'm like, look, I just want to make sure I'm delivering this properly. I get on a Zoom call with him. I'm like, look, can you treat me as though I know nothing? You just walked me through. It all made sense, but there was definitely there's some complicated things that need to get done to do proper QC and everything.
Right.
But I delivered it, and the artist really enjoyed it. It was great. And so you do one project well for someone, then more projects start to come in. But at a certain point, Sony calls and is like, hey, we know you're doing great work. Everyone's enjoying the work, but we're under the impression that you're not working on a Sony 360 speaker system.
Were you doing headphones or using alternate
No, I was
speakers?
using my Atmos array and then also using headphones.
Yeah.
And you can actually tell the Sony 360 software what speakers you have. So it's adaptive. So it's actually quite intelligent, their technology. So you can do it, but you're missing out on the potential of the format, which is there's this lower layer of speakers. So there's 3 in the lower level, 3 in the mid level, and 3 in the upper level. So there's 9 speakers in front of you, like this wall. And then you have a left rear surround and a right rear surround, and a left top rear surround and a right top rear surround. So it's like 9 in front and 4 behind. And yeah, you can see it there in the image. And once you,
3 across, 3
yeah. And once you start working in it, everything starts to make sense. The headphone algorithm starts to make sense when you mix this way. It's based on these speaker locations. The binauralization is looking for that information in the lower level. It's looking for, it's a different kind of spherical relationship where Dolby's much more like a rectangle.
Interesting.
And so, anyways, they are like, look, if you're going to be doing this much work, we'd really like you to be working on a proper Sony system, which I respect. Same with Dolby, right? I mean, they have their standards and they want to make sure that the folks doing the work are living up to those standards. So they connected me with Genelec, and we were able to get the speaker system in there. And I'm feeding those Genelecs via AES off my Avid Matrix 2, which is on the other side of the room.
Oh, each one is self-powered?
Self-powered.
AS input?
No, it's self-powered via, like an AC cable, but it's doing the conversion, and it's taking a digital signal in and doing the conversion at the source. So
yeah, sorry, that's what I mean. That's what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah, and so realistically, look, getting another 13 speakers plus a sub, it's insanity. I mean, I can't I can't pretend, and I don't pretend to be sane in any facet of this. Right? So now that that's out of the way, I was like, yeah, I want to do it right. So Genelec helped, and these are, not huge speakers. I use a Trinnov for tuning, so I was able to get the space really nicely tuned. And I started working. And so those screens are actually HDMI splits off my main screens. So I can just take a wireless mouse and a wireless keyboard, sit at that little table, and I'm working off the same interface, same Pro Tools system, exact same computer. And then if I want to go pop over and use some hardware, or I want to go to my headphones, I'm just, my headphone amp, I just got a little headphone extender over to the other side of the room.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think it was Jay Clark who was on the show, was talking about his doing the dual Atmos 360. And I think it was all in the same room or same space somehow at Infrasonic West.
Yeah. My challenge comes back to one of your previous questions, which is that big giant desk full of gear.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Let's see if I can get back to that, because that was quite something to see. There is a lot of stuff right there. Yeah. So
there's no way the lower speakers, there's no chance, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So if I did it again, I think I don't know what I would do, honestly.
It'd be all about the speakers.
It'd be all about the speakers. And of course, now, if we're going to talk about it, there's a lot of hardware there. I love analog equipment. As a stereo mastering engineer, especially, those tools are very dear to me. And this is not an analog versus digital thing. It's more of it's a workflow thing. It's when you get the right chain doing the right thing for the right song, there's something there. And can it be chased or potentially mimicked in the digital realm? Of course. I mean, but I come up through that world. I've sort of built everything as a mastering engineer, and those are tools to me that I connect with the same as when I want to pick up a P bass or a jazz bass or one of my other basses. And so, these racks are full, and I designed that furniture with a friend of mine to fit as much rack equipment as it possibly could.
Yeah, I like that 4-letter word, rack equipment. Yeah, it looks like you almost have like 3 different volume knobs just to make all this stuff.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it question how deep you want to go. These days, the solution, actually, you can't see it in this photo, but right in the smack in the middle of the desk is a controller for my Trinnov, which is the room correction computer, essentially.
Is that sort of down here or something?
It's right there in the middle, yeah. And so I eventually wrangled everything to come through the Trinnov, and then I use the Trinnov controller for everything. Not because it's even necessarily the best at it, but it was the only one that could do all of them. And when you have to have a thing for stereo and a thing for Atmos, and it's just more points of failure. So I eventually wrangled it all to be able to work with one knob. But certainly for a bunch of years, it was like, there's this system and there's this system. But you learn your stuff, and I'm the one working in there, so it's okay.
Yeah, it's cool, man. Well, to that point too, there's a lot to be said for having, one system that you're working with, even if it's flexing to do multiple things every day, because even me with the podcast studio, I built a podcast studio here so that I could always just step right in and get to work. But even with that, you just step in one day, and it's like, wow, it worked. Like, not only did it work yesterday, it worked this morning before lunch, and now it doesn't work. So you're always troubleshooting every time you sort of switch around. So it can be helpful to have one system that is just, even if you're just switching internally or something. I feel like that can be a smarter move.
I completely agree.
Are you ready to launch your career in the audio or entertainment business? SAE Institute Nashville, right here in the heart of Music Row, offers hands-on programs to prepare you for the industry. From studio production and live sound to audio for film and a whole lot more. You'll learn by doing, working with professional-grade gear alongside experienced industry pros. If you're more into the business side of entertainment, SAE's Entertainment Business Program teaches essential basics like contracts and promotion to help you navigate the industry. With diploma, associate, or bachelor's degrees, there's a path for everyone. Plus, Career Services supports graduates as they take the next step. Want to see it for yourself? Immerse yourself in Nashville's exciting music scene and book a tour today at nashville.sae.edu or call 615-244-5848. Howdy, Rockstars. We're back now for the jam session, aka the second half of the show. My guest today is Justin Gray, joining us from Toronto. And Justin, are you ready to jam, dude?
I'm ready.
You know, I know the answer. I know the answer is yes, because what we're about to talk about is really cool. And it's your project that you are making as a musician and also as a, an immersive mixer and creator. And seeing you play bass in what we're about to look at was like, I was like, oh, this dude can play, Unfortunately, I guess we can't really hear the audio. So you Rockstars will have, if we can, we'll have a link so that you can, if it's released by that point, you can just go over and actually watch this full trailer and everything. But tell us a little bit about what we're about to look at. We've got the trailer queued up, Justin.
Sure. So, as I mentioned, when I got into immersive, I got into it as a musician or as a sort of a creative wanting to make things. And so the first things that I actually mixed in the format were my own records. I've released records with a bunch of different bands, like records I've produced or even under my own name from the past. I pulled apart all the parts and reimagined them. And right away with a bunch of that music, I was like, oh yeah, this is actually what I think I've been trying to make this whole time. But through that process, I also learned a lot about what the potential is when you start to think about it at a compositional level, right? When you change the stage, when you change the potential of where you're going to present sound from, it can really have a deep effect as a composer, let alone as a producer, recording engineer, and all that stuff. Now, also, in between that time and now, I've been very fortunate to work on thousands of songs in the immersive formats, and where I'm tasked with the honor of reimagining other people's music in immersive audio. And so I really think of that job as entailing a lot of skills. You sort of have to have a production mind. You have to be a good mix engineer. If you're not going to mastering, which I do advocate for it, but if you're not, you're a mastering engineer now. But you're also an orchestrator, right? Like the decisions to where to put things. That's a very specific creative job that is not a small task. It's, if anything, it's probably the most important part of what I would refer to as spatial remixing, which is remixing songs in a spatial format. And so I've learned a ton. It's an unfathomable amount at this point by working on such a broad amount of music.
Dude, I knew you were spatial from the first moment I met you.
Yeah, there we go. So then I sit down, I want to write a record. I want to make some new music. I had some ideas that are sort of coming to me and started to get a feel of what I wanted to create. And so I wrote the music specifically for 3 dimensions. And by that, I mean, like, I orchestrated it thinking, okay, I want the drums here. I want bass here. I want brass here. I want strings here. I want this soloist here. I want this effect here. Like, even before hearing it in the speakers, like, I've worked on it so much that I at this point, I can just sort of sit down and imagine it. And even on a score, just be like, okay, this part will go there. And, you start to think of it initially not in like this precise mixing way. It's more like something will be in front of me or beside me or behind me or above me. And so I started writing the music. Now, I will say, even if you're writing with spatial audio in mind, at the end of the day, a groove is a groove, a melody is a melody, counterpoint is counterpoint. It either grooves or it doesn't. It's either a moving melody or a moving solo or it's not. Like if something doesn't feel great in mono, it doesn't matter how many speakers we have. So I still think that what happens as a composer is just spatial orchestration becomes another parameter, but it doesn't supersede the most important parameters, which, well, I won't even say most important, but you know what I mean. Like you got to have a bass line that someone wants to listen to or that you are moved by. You got to have a groove that's sick and deep. For me, that's important. You got to have counterpoint that's beautiful and engaging. There needs to be a story in your song. And I write a lot, mostly instrumental music. So, and I've been composing since I was 12. So there's a lot of factors to it. But I will say that being able to now write at the source with that in mind was a total life-changing experience for me. I think it really unlocked something that I think I have been searching for as a creator, and it just wasn't there. And then now by being, having access to this technology essentially has sort of unlocked my ability to realize that feeling. So I wrote it. I sequenced a lot of stuff, or I played a lot of stuff. I play guitar, bass, piano. I'll play percussion, drums, whatever. So I sequenced a lot of stuff in my DAW and like actually got the MIDI out and, used like made brass parts in MIDI and started to sort of hear it in Immersive first, which was awesome. Like,
are you saying you sort of demoed it yourself and then used the mixing to put it in the right places?
No, this is before even like finishing the charts. So then I figured it out for myself. I charted it all out. And at that point, now we enter into like, okay, I've got the music ready or like almost ready. There's a lot of improvisation in the music, right? So
you can write out manuscripts and all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah. I mean,
is that what it's called? Manuscript, right?
Yeah, or scores or charts.
Score, yeah. The score,
No, I mean, in my history, you mentioned sort of even off camera that I'm a teacher. I mean, I've been a sort of trained professional in that regard my entire career. I'm now on faculty at Humber in the production department, but at one point I was the head of a composition department.
Oh, wow.
So that aspect is just sort of a part of who I am. So then I scored everything out. I orchestrated everything. I arranged it, made all the charts, everything, and started to work on pre-pro for the sessions. And once the concept of the compositions was already, imagined and realized and, at least written out and planned in Immersive, what it led me to next is, well, how to record this properly. And this is where I think one of the most fun parts of this process was how we went about recording it, which is integrating immersive recording techniques in the studio for every single layer.
Shall I screen share this video a little bit and we can kind of talk through it a little bit? Does that kind of show us that are we at the right stage for that?
Absolutely. I think the visuals would be super helpful.
Okay, cool. Let me see if you're getting this. And hopefully it's not too messy on the screen there. And I don't think we'll hear anything, Rockstars.
You get to see me.
Did you hear that, or was that just me hearing that?
I can't hear it.
Okay, yeah, I don't think there's. I'll mute it so that I'm not distracted, because then I'll hear two descriptions at once. But anyway, here's this trailer, and you can kind of give us the narration.
Yeah, so I mean, here we're looking at, of course, the composition part, what we just talked about, writing and arranging the music in advance. I did it in the studio, so it's like I have access to the tech. But yeah, if we pause even here for a second, what we just saw there is one of the many microphone techniques. When we talk about, when we place a microphone, there's got to be a why, right? Why am I placing this microphone? There's no such thing as a right or a wrong.
I think I jumped ahead for you. Sorry about that.
That's okay. We got a good image.
Pause it. There you go. Now you see you placing the mic there.
Yeah. So what I realize is like, and there's a couple examples that make it really clear for me that I use to describe this. When I want the brass quartet to be behind me one of the challenges that we face when remixing music is if something wasn't recorded to be behind you, let's say it was recorded in mono or stereo, well, those recording techniques are designed around the idea of stereo speakers. They have been perfected for that purpose. And one of the challenges with presenting music in immersive often is that we want to place something somewhere, but we don't necessarily have all of the original content to be able to do so naturally. Now, through all of my time going to listening and listening and listening, but also going to AES and NAMM and spending time with who I consider my mentors in the immersive community. This is my Morten Lindberg and Leslie Ann Jones and Ronald Prent and George Massenberg, and I'm going to forget some folks here, but Elliot Shiner and Richard King, and it could go on and on. I'm going to remember some and be like, oh, how did I not say their name? Hyun Cook Lee, another, really, really deep inspiration for me as a recording engineer. I've studied these classical techniques, and I've recorded also acoustic classical music with immersive techniques, and their concept is to use microphones to capture sound at the source and then use the speakers to play back those microphone sources. All of the recording techniques, regardless of the musical style that have been developed to date, have always been in pursuit of searching for a sound. And when we talk about a Decca tree, we're talking about Decca recordings, we're talking about orchestral recordings, largely for the film industry. Not just for the film industry, though, but also for, commercial classical music, but acoustic music capture. And regardless of what music we're going to make, whether it's total pop music, electronic music, I think it's good practice for everybody to study how to record acoustic instruments properly.
Yeah.
And so I've done that, and I've been an engineer for many years and spent a lot of time in the studio as a recording engineer. And so I've been studying the art of what it means to capture sound for 3 dimensions with all of those mentors, and also just by studying recordings and reading and going to conferences and experimenting myself for a number of years now. And my concept here was I wanted to employ those various techniques as well as some new ones to be able to capture my music in a way that translated the feeling that I wanted to convey in the recording. And like I said, so many times I've been tasked as a remixer to have to take something and spatialize it and then use reverbs or use various Haas effects or whatever to try and create a sense of space from a source that wasn't necessarily originally intended to be above me or behind me. It can totally work. It can be amazing. But I had an opportunity here to sort of start from scratch. So in the studio, we set up a 914 speaker system so that we could actually listen in real time. I went to a studio where I teach, Humber College, and we block booked the studio for 6 weeks.
Ooh, so let me at the risk of getting this wrong, let me share the screen again and see if. So this is the video we were just looking at, but I've also got this tab, which is that Humber Studio, or is this a different location?
No, it's the same one. I was just teaching there the other day when that video was made.
Beautiful location, man.
Oh, it's a stunning studio. It's a super quiet room, unbelievable acoustic qualities, like really, really clean reflections.
No wonder we want to buy Canada. Just kidding. Sorry, dumb joke.
It's okay.
So what an amazing studio too for a college setup like that too.
Oh, it's a total world. Yeah, if somewhere in that video we'll probably get to see a sense of the ceiling, but it's a totally world class room, and a world class. It's like just mix room and control room. So we set up a 914 system in the studio, and every single day that we recorded, which is now, for the record, it's over 40 days of recording.
40 days of recording your record?
Yeah.
Wow.
40 days. Now, I'll explain a little bit more about why. Is because it's done in an overdub style.
Not just because it worked for Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. But it's done in an overdub style, and that's because I wanted two things. One is, and on to stay with the recording side, is I wanted to have the control over every single instrument to be able to record it in a way that gave it a very specific immersive perspective. So sometimes that involved using like a more classical style microphone array, like an 11-channel 7+4 microphone array. Sometimes that involved placing microphones around the room in various places to just get just the right amount of reflections. Sometimes it meant making really small immersive arrays, like let's say 4 mics on the lower level and 4 mics on the upper level faced in towards an instrument, which is a very different approach. But what it can do is it can make you as the listener basically inside that instrument. So there's a song with the hung drum, if anyone's ever heard a hung drum. Well, that's how I recorded it. Or there's a song where a good friend of mine has this huge collection of Himalayan singing bowls, and he's playing them in front of him. And so I have 7 mics on the lower level and 4 on the upper layer, but faced in towards him. So you as a listener are sitting where he's sitting. It's an incredible experience. So like every single instrument was captured that way. And if I had recorded it all at once, let's say we went to a hall and did it as like a live off the floor kind of thing with a big stage, because there's almost 40 musicians involved. It could obviously sound amazing, right? It could be, there's nothing stopping it from being really great, but it would have not allowed me to capture each instrument as specifically as I wanted to. And so, you know, when folks get to hear the record, if this is released in June, there'll be at least 1 or 2 songs available, and then the record's being released in August. So cool. When folks hear the record, there are some moments, some intros, some solos, some things along those lines where like I very, very carefully mic'd that instrument to do what it's doing. And so when it came to a mix stage, this sort of comes to your question, everything was already in its location during tracking. We had a 914 speaker setup, which is an Atmos array. The microphones were placed, the musicians were placed in such a way that like it was coming to life as it was composed, as it was supposed to, 1 layer at a time at the source.
Rock your music production with the updated Complete 15 bundle from Native Instruments, featuring Contact 8 and expanded hardware integration. Whether you're crafting cinematic scores, EDM bangers, or experimental soundscapes, Complete 15 gives you industry-leading synths, sampled instruments, and creative effects to bring your ideas to life. Contact 8 introduces powerful new tools like chords and phrases for instant inspiration, the Leap tool for dynamic looping, and Conflux, a hybrid instrument blending organic and synth textures in real time. And with Machine 3 now available, you'll enjoy even tighter integration with Machine Plus and the latest NKS-supported hardware from brands like Akai, Korg, and Novation. Plus, Complete 15 features revamped Massive X, Guitar Rig 7 Pro, and Isotope 11, helping you shape, mix, and master with ease. Use the code ROCK10 for 10% off at nativeinstruments.com. Yeah, so it sounds sort of like what I'm guessing maybe Bruce Swayde had in mind when he was saying record in stereo. You know, it's like just position whatever overdub you want to be where it's going to be in the mix.
Exactly. That's the perfect example. Now again, if we look at the history of immersive music, I already named, you know, some of the folks that I admire so much, and there are recordings by Morton and by Leslie and by Richard and George and everybody that have presented ensembles in the round with these immersive captures that are just the most stunning recordings. And even then, if you go back to 5.1 recordings, like I have the Lord of the Rings box sets of I originally had the DVDs and now I have it on Blu-ray of the original 5.1 recordings of those at Air and at Abbey Road. And it's the most beautiful thing you've ever heard. Like it was recorded and mixed in 5.1. The microphones are placed in such a way where you could truly just be in that room. And I wanted that feeling, but the thing is, as you've listened to the music, it's not classical music. It's fusion music. So I want to have the kick drum feel like a Headhunters meets Glasper record. I want, you know what I mean? Where I want to have the string section sound like it's in a movie score. and I want to have the Himalayan bowls feel like you're sitting in the middle of them, but I want the electric bass to feel like, like a Jaco or a Victor record. These are different perspectives that can't actually exist together in an acoustic space at the same time. It's not possible.
Right, right. So in the same way that multi-track initially created soundscapes that hadn't existed, this is, you're looking for creating something that hasn't existed yet sonically.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know about saying it hasn't existed. I mean, again, there's some beautiful records that have absolutely explored overdubs and layers. So I don't know about, music is a continuum. I mean, I don't like the idea that something happens like for the first time. I think that's sort of absurd.
Okay, fair. I love it.
But, and anyone who feels that way, I would encourage them to just look at their own influences and study the history a little more, because there's always a lineage, right? That's how music is. That's how life grows. It's a beautiful thing. But what I would say is, what I wanted to create is what I heard. I wanted to create the sound that I was after. And that involves layering a bunch of different spatial perspectives on top of each other. The first song, the way the record opens, called Flow. You got to hear it, actually. I sent you this link.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
And you're, again, you're playing. I was like, damn, that dude can really play bass,
Thank you.
You were doing some stuff. I just didn't know that about you. I knew you from meeting you at NAMM and interacting at AES and NAMM and stuff, but hadn't yet, and knew of your mixing, but didn't know of your musicality yet. So that was cool to see.
No, I appreciate it. And so the record opens, my good friend Marito, we tracked 11 different kalimbas for 11 different speakers, and we did it as overdubs. And so you're in the middle of a kalimba ensemble while I'm playing a sort of an opening bass solo. And the bass solo, I put 4 amps in the room and recorded it around array and quad, and then I have effects on the ceiling. I mean, that's what I wanted to make, right?
That's awesome.
And it's totally, like, that's the best part of it is I adore being a professional mix engineer and a mastering engineer. I adore working with other artists. I adore serving that music. But this time, I got to just search for like whatever I think is musical.
Yeah.
And it turns out that, I come through Rage Against the Machine. I'm a huge, my dad and me and my mom, like, we love 70s classic rock. I love Radiohead. I also love classical music and orchestral music and jazz and experimental music. And, I love so many different musics, and that's all infused in this thing. So,
so cool. Should we continue showing some of this video
sure.
as we talk, just so everybody can kind of see, because there's some great images here of the music being made and stuff like that.
Yeah, maybe just press play and I'll sort of narrate.
Yeah, you can just keep chatting and I'll just let this roll so that we can see it.
Yeah, so
and of course we saw some of the studio already and everything.
Exactly, and this trailer, I'm not there's the Himalayan bowls, there's the hung drum.
That's great.
And there's the sarengi, there's the microphone array.
So
this is,
cool.
Horns and strings. There's the 11-channel array.
Look at that. That's a lot of mic stands too.
Oh yeah, it's none of it's for the faint of heart. But if there's a brass ensemble. And so it's also close mics and distance mics. It's not just about the immersive mics. Like, I still want to hear the trumpet, like right there. Mm-hmm. But I also want to have the reflections in the space generated naturally.
Who's that guy?
That's a little bit of me. I'm playing my 6-string bass mostly on this record. And then there's the Atmos array that was set up in the control room.
Well, shoot, I don't know if it's going to let me rewind just a little. It didn't like that when I tried that last time. I'll try one more time. But the control room, hearing stuff as it happens.
Yeah.
Now, how does that work? So I've heard people say, oh, there's latency, so therefore you can't yet compose through an Atmos rendering. Is that true? And if you're doing that here, what do you want to say about that process so we can understand it?
It's a great point. So we have to understand that the word Atmos and the word immersive need to be very, very, the line between them is very important. I am composing spatially. I am recording and producing immersively. and then I am producing and mixing in Atmos.
Okay.
Atmos is not a tracking technology. Atmos is a production technology in that I will give it to the format that if once I get into Pro Tools and I'm listening through Atmos, I think at that point we can't deny that we're in that ecosystem and therefore it's part of our decision making. So I do think that we can produce in Atmos. We don't record in Atmos. We record in discrete channel. There are no objects when we record something. Now, as latency comes down, someone could record into an object. Fine, but realistically speaking, what's happening there is that you are encoding something spatially that's being recorded. And actually, what I will very strongly suggest for folks is that when you, okay, we all know that recording in mono is tricky. We know that recording in stereo is tricky, right? There are worlds and universes of perfecting two-channel recording. We'll take that up to 11 or 16 channel recordings, and we're talking about a world of complex, microphone placements, phase relationships, all of those factors. It requires the kind of precision that you'd think it does in order to be successful. So when I'm recording and we're monitoring, we are listening in discrete channel. Atmos is not involved at the recording stage here. So what that means is I got a mic coming in on 11 channels, and I am sending that mic directly to a speaker. It's called discrete channel placement. And it's the same as like original 5.1 or 7.1 or 9.1 or even 7.1.4. You can deliver music in discrete channel 7.1.4, no objects. The issue is that it doesn't do all the beautiful things that Atmos does, which is encode it into this adaptive container. So I think it's important to understand, like I'm tracking there just as I would in stereo, except in 9.1, although actually I'm not tracking very often any LFE content. So realistically, 9 and 6 is what is, and I'm not always placing all those microphones, of course, but
right.
The
You're
potential
placing the relevant microphones when you record.
I'm placing the relevant microphones, and I'm placing them to be discreetly in one speaker, because it's sort of like, look, if you're recording piano for stereo and you toe in the panning to like 30 and 30, you can do that, but realistically, you probably want to check it in mono, and you probably want to listen to it in hard LR just to really get a sense of what you're doing and what you're recording. Later on, you're probably going to work with your panning to perfect your soundstage. But at the source, there's no time for you to be messing around with the minute details of whether you want to be at 90 or 72 or 89, right? You got to just make sure the sound is good. You've got to make sure your phase relationships are good. And what's way more important than all of this, you set up this much technology, the risk is you get in the way of the music. And as a producer, who cares how many microphones you have if you don't get a good take? Doesn't matter. So this all has to be done fast and accurately so that I can get into being a producer, which is why my good friend Alex Gamble was engineering with me for this whole project. Right also a great immersive mixer himself. So that once I set up all the mics the night before, he'd come in the morning, help perfect them, and he could go into engineer mode and I could be in producer mode, because I got artists coming in 10 a.m. We're done at 6. We got to track a whole record of brass and, and repeat strings, and now a soloist, and now the saxophone sections, and now you know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, all of this stuff is useless if the music's not happening. Yeah.
It's a great point. I mean, and it's also a good reminder to hear you describe setting it up the night before and then come in the next day for the music. And that is one of those lessons that I remember learning just for tracking sessions in the studio. It's like, get it all done the night before so that when you come in for the actual music part, you just, there's always something that's going to try and trip you up when it's the music part. So make that as small as possible,
Absolutely.
As minimal as possible. All right, well, let's see. Let's keep this thing rolling, and we'll see what else we're looking at. I got to click like 5 buttons to share it each time. Here we go. All right, so that's the room where, and so you're able to hear the music without any latency issues, just come straight through the mic's lines, analog or digital through Pro Tools or whatever, and then hit the speakers directly so that you're getting a sense of that sound.
Right. Now, if you pause again, What we just saw was a whole sequence of the musicians coming into the room. And I'm going to say this is the most important of them all. As an engineer, of course, hearing it back immersively in real time, and as a producer, it affected me because it encouraged me to potentially do another layer or change the microphone positions or, you know, all the kinds of things that we would do in stereo. Oh, you know what? I think we could double track this vocal. It would sound good left and right. Well, we would do 11 vocals. But here's the thing is as an immersive engineer and a composer, I can imagine all these things and it all makes sense to me. But to an artist who has no idea what this is, first of all, they're not there for a lecture. We're there to make music. And what I found was when they came into the room and I just press play, it takes about 20 seconds for a good musician to totally get it. You don't need to talk about technology. You don't need to talk about anything. Immediately, these musicians, like the musicians are at such a high level who are involved in this project. I'm very fortunate to be surrounded by some pretty world-class players. And you know, these are people I've produced for and mixed for and toured with. Like these people are like family to me. In fact, my brother is the drummer. Derek's
right on.
My actual brother. So, man, I'll give you an example. I've got a friend named Nagme. She's a Persian percussionist. And on this record, she plays udu and daf. Daf is a frame drum. And so I had this idea that for this song, it's the third song on the record, that after this big, long intro, the daf would come in like left and right. So it'd be like there's two players standing beside you. So we track one, we track another take, and I get Nagme to come in the room to listen back. And I think it sounded pretty great. Nagme and I we've toured together. We've made a lot of music together. We never talk about technology. We talk about music. We talk about family and life and food, but we don't talk about Pro Tools. We don't talk about microphone placements. That's not our relationship. Nagme sits down and listens for about 30 seconds and is like, okay, can you send me back on the floor? Like, yeah, sure, go for it. And right then she's like, all right, I'd like you to do a layer. I want to do 4 layers. The first one's going to go in front of you. The second one's going to go in front of you. The third one's going to go behind you. The fourth one's going to go behind you.
iZotope is truly amazing for mixing and mastering your music. Check out the new iZotope Catalyst series featuring Plasma, Aurora, and Cascadia. Powerful tools designed to supercharge your mixes with intelligent processing. These innovative plugins give you dynamic control over saturation, reverb, and delay, effortlessly enhancing excitement and clarity. And now Neutron introduces new modules like Clipper, Density, and Phase, completing your flexible, fully equipped mixing suite. Plus, the new AI-powered Mix Assistant helps you create a custom signal chain for your audio, referencing professional instrument profiles or your own examples, with easy macro controls to dial in a perfect mix. Use the coupon code ROCK10 to get 10% off Plasma, Ozone, Neutron, RX, or any of the fantastic plugins at iZotope.com. So you're saying like the musician, the artist in them, without even needing to understand the tech, just immediately gets the compositional creative quality of it.
Immediate. And so she tracked, I did it, I panned it as we're going, hearing it in real time. She came back in the room, sat down, and was like, that's exactly what I imagined. And that's honestly, cool. Like I even just sort of have like hairs on my arms now. Like it was such a deep moment for me and it happened like all the time. All the musicians would come in and rather than us needing to be like, oh, this is going to be so cool later on, we know what it's like to be in the studio with good musicians. We're creative people. These are, you know, the whole joy of being in the studio, especially when you're making sort of jazz or world adjacent music that involves improv, is like the music doesn't really exist until the people play it. And when you get people at this level, they can react so fast. It's instantaneous. And their ability to react to it, and then more importantly, to play into it, to immediately be like, oh, this would be awesome. And I'm just sitting there being like, oh my gosh. And this happened day upon day upon day. And so And that's how records are made, right? Like the records are not just a producer bossing people around telling what to do. That's not the vibe. It's about getting good people in the room and sort of letting it happen, letting it flow. And the ability for people to hear it in real time, I don't think it could have happened any other way.
I think it's great. And it's a good reminder too, because I know what it's like to find myself in a producer chair with a singer or something in the other room. Typically it might be a vocalist, because it's one of the most layerable instruments, that you might run into on a session. In stereo, where you're trying to say, oh, do one more, and then you're trying to visualize what it's doing in the control room, and they might hear that after it's all done. But what you're describing is just that good reminder to, especially with something like this, bring people in and let them sort of visualize and create it in their head before they even go do it. They come up with the idea, and they come up with a great idea and go out and just go create it. Instead of like pointing and guiding and saying, do this, and then they get confused. It's easy for musicians to get confused sometimes. We're like, I don't really know what's going on, but you're also right that the pros tend to have more of that confidence to understand that there's a process to this, and amateur musicians can get derailed very quickly too. Yeah,
and everyone on this record, I mean, Toronto has an exceptional musical community, not just of musicians from every part of the planet, super high level. It's a very multicultural city, and so I've got folks, Indian instrumentalists who have come and are just like the best, Persian instrumentalists, African instrumentalists, South American instrumentalists, like East Asian instrumentalists, blues players, R&B players, like it's jazz players. Like the scene is deep. Now, there are lots of American cities and cities around the world that are like this as well, but Toronto is certainly one of them.
Yeah.
And I've been here my whole life. This is, like I said, this is my musical family. So I can call on folks who are so good, like just so good at what they do. Which means we come in, as long as my charts are tight, the mics are in a good spot, we're recording 8 songs in a day, no problem.
That's amazing. Now, is it fair to ask you if funding for a record like this is a particular challenge too?
Absolutely. So this record could not exist without our granting system in Canada. So it's funded by the Canada Council for the Arts, the Ontario Arts Council, and the Toronto Arts Council, and myself. So, in Canada, we, at least to this moment in history, for the last number of decades, have had these granting organizations where, as an artist, you can apply, and you rarely get it, but every once in a while, your project and the various goals of the granting organizations, and your time comes and you have the opportunity to accept funding. And so you can apply at a national level, which is the Canada Council for the Arts, and they will fund relatively large projects. They only fund so many in a year, and again, it's a big community, so you got to wait your turn, and you've also got to have a pretty exceptional application and everything together. And then on a provincial level, you have states, we have provinces, so Ontario, and then Toronto on a municipal level. I aligned all 3 and applied for all 3. This was applied for during COVID, and during COVID, actually, our government really helped artists a lot and sort of extended some of the funding that wasn't being used in other sectors, and they actually sort of looked at communities that were hurting, which the artist community was, we all know. Right. So yeah, that funding is there, and that's what I say is it's enough to get it like to that point, and enough to get me in a lot of trouble.
Right. You're still going to have to bust your butt to get across the finish line. Well, yeah,
and at a certain point, the other factor here, which the fact that we have video for everything, we haven't even seen one of the songs. But again, if folks are listening to this at this point that is released, there's certainly some videos on YouTube. We videoed every single thing, and the album is a film to me. So I worked with my dear friend, cinematographer Michael Fisher. We had 5-6 cameras on every single person every day, all day. I think we're getting up to about 200 terabytes of hard drive space.
Wow. Yeah. Video takes up a lot of space. I've learned
so much. And so, you know, you can see like there's a saxophonist, like these are videos of the record. And so the way I'm releasing the record, which actually, depending on when this has been released, June 7th in Toronto, it's being released at a venue we have called Massey Hall. They have an immersive playback venue on their second floor. And they have a huge screen, and we're playing back the record immersively for like a 250 person audience. You know, my goal here is to I think of this as a cinematic immersive project. Like it's a movie, and it's a movie, but it's not like music videos. Like they're live videos. And you know, if people are taking solos, you got to capture every single one. Right. And then Michael's got to catch up to my edits, and I've got to create a system where he can follow my edits across all those takes. I mean, it's an insane amount of work. But I've been really grateful for the response for those I've had a chance to share for, and I'm pumped to get to, just use this as a way to share, like not only to make the experience for those who might hear it on Apple or on their home systems, but I'm working hard to facilitate as many opportunities for immersive playback as possible. So there's some events in the works at this stage. I won't say the dates because they're not confirmed, but in Los Angeles and in Germany and in New York and in Montreal, as well as some other ones in Toronto throughout the year where I'm going to use a movie theater, like the TIFF movie theater. TIFF is the Toronto International Film Festival. We can rent that movie theater and do an event, it's like a gig essentially.
So cool. So cool. And it's great to see all these images too from the studio, just to get a sense of all the mic stands and placement. And, you know, all the people working together too, because it seems it's such a collaborative process.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. And one of the nice things too about, for anyone who knows, you know, when you're making music, I mean, the reality is that when you hear the record, I would say 80% of it is very acoustic in nature. You got acoustic sounds, acoustic instruments. There's also definitely some electric stuff, including the bass. But, you know, there's synthesizers, there's other effects, and there's other, you know, there's no limits here to any production stuff other than, you know, whatever was able to be imagined. Or whatever I don't know, obviously, is not in there. But when it comes to the actually, help me here. I lost my train of thought. What was I just?
You were talking about the music, whatever you.
Oh, the collaborative aspect.
Whatever could be imagined. Here,
yeah. Sorry, it was the collaborative aspect. When you make records like in more of a pop approach, right? Even though this is an acoustic record, it's very much done like a pop record in that it's overdubs. One of the nice things is that you get to work one-on-one with people or like in small groups. And it's such a different vibe than if you have 40 people in the room, right? If you have 40 people in the room, you've got to just drive. It's like being a conductor. Right.
There's no intimacy in the process.
There's no intimacy, and that's totally cool. And there's massive benefits to recording live, and there would have been time benefits to me, and cinematic benefits to capturing everyone at the same time. I mean, there would have been benefits. So again, the reason we didn't do it was for sonic purposes. But there's something so beautiful about like, oh, you know, this artist is coming in and we get to spend a day together creating and listening and being together. And, you know, it's like as professional musicians, like sometimes our best time hanging is when we're working together. So I really treasured that time.
Well, it gets me inspired to realize that, you know, there is an option to begin learning this stuff on our own, even in our home studios. And, you know, we'll need more microphones than we normally needed, but good chance maybe we've got a few mics in our studio too, and we can use them for things. But it'd be fun to start experimenting with recording for Atmos. But a question that comes to mind that I think the Rockstars would love to hear from you too is this leap from stereo to so many speakers like you've got set up. But we also have this introductory or in between mode where we may be able to start experimenting just in a pair of headphones. So I wanted to ask you about that. What do you want to say to the Rockstars about getting started learning, like, what the hell is Atmos and where do I start? Where and how do I start using this in my studio to just see what it does with regards to headphones?
Yep, absolutely. So as we talked about in the first half, the job of the headphone is using binaural technology, which is its goal, depending on how good it's doing a job is a different question, but its goal is to virtualize that speaker playback, that 360-degree playback in our headphones. And so for some folks, myself included, binauralization works really well. I can work in headphones personally and experience a great sense of depth. Is it the same? No, but it's still very musical experience for me. And that's because of my head shape, my ear shape, my shoulders, the size of my head. It's called our head-related transfer function, our HRTF. Everyone's got a different sonic imprint. Everybody has a different sort of way of their HRTF is different. And so for some folks, these binaural algorithms that have been chosen to be sort of like the center, that means that I'm probably like close to the target tested audience for this.
Are you telling us that you're an average human?
I am, Justin? I guess I'm pretty average. At least the shape of my ears and my head must be. You don't seem that average
to me, man. I don't know. So that's cool. So, the binaural gives us that, ballpark of version of a stereo or a immersive listening experience in a pair of headphones.
Exactly.
And so when we want to mess with this, we don't have to get too deep into the weeds here, but would there be a way? So for example, if I'm mixing in stereo and I've already started dialing in a mix and now there's plugins on things and there's some latency issues, I know that I can also fire up a track, go straight to the, stereo output if I've set up my mix properly and do an overdub in sync with my mix and then come back and then put it into the mix and sort of place it and things like that. Can we think about Atmos and headphones that way, where we could have like a binaural render of this composition we're making and then do a new overdub and then sort of place it into the object and now put it in place?
It's getting better, but we're really still at the limitation of our computers, right? Latency, if you're tracking parts and the latency is beyond, for me, if it's beyond 128, it's like I'm not really, in terms of my buffer size, like if I have to have a higher buffer size, so the better.
But with like on my HDX system, I can put it in.
Absolutely. So if you have
DSP
a solution
mode
for that, then but you wouldn't be hearing it in binaural in real time, because that's the one part.
Understood. Yeah. So it would be more like we could do the overdub and just hear it mono. Yep. I feel like when we're playing music out on the studio floor anyway, I rarely actually hear what it's gonna be anywhere, because I've got an instrument in front of me. I'm singing out of my head, whatever it is. So it's just enough to like do the music and compose, but then we could go in and then like pop it onto the track, flip it into the Atmos mode and hear it in the context that way.
Absolutely. And I think what I would say is, like, if someone is inspired to do this, they should do it and they should experiment. And the idea that a headphone is anything but an awesome, accessible tool to get into this, like, that's what it is. It's totally made this accessible in a way that wasn't accessible before. And whenever we see technology do that in history, it has led to wicked music, right? So there's Wicked again. It's Wicked.
It's a great movie too.
It is a good movie. So I'd say for folks is that what we need to do in headphones is we need to understand that there are limitations, but that there are also massive opportunities. And so the more that you do it, the more you're going to train your brain to be able to understand it. It's a hard thing to say to folks, but the first time you hear binaural and the 100th time you hear binaural, I do believe that your brain has changed in that time. Its ability to synthesize this information. Look, there might be some tests that suggest otherwise, but I've experienced it myself. And I know other people who are like, oh, the first time I listened to it, it was weird. And then now I like it. I'm like, yeah, because you've adapted to something new. Your brain is experiencing this. So I would encourage folks to do it. I would encourage folks to also, what you said, remember that when you're tracking, you got to focus on tone, groove, and parts. Who cares where it's spatialized if it doesn't sound good, if it's not in time and it's not in tune?
Yeah.
Focus on the parts, and then afterwards, if you don't have access to the speakers or, all of those factors, then do what you did, a 2-stage process where you're like, okay, well, then I listen to it over there. Might take you a little longer, but it's still allowing you to access this world at a very, modest price point with very low level of investment to see if it's inspiring some great music.
Are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble figuring out how to get your mixes to sound great? Do they sound weak and distant or lack punch and clarity? Well, I've got a gift for you to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding a lot more like professional mixes. And it's my free course called Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio with free and stock plugins in Pro Tools. And the best part is, these mixing techniques will work for you in any DAW, whether you're in Logic, Cubase, PreSonus Studio One, Reaper, or anything you can think of. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and you can find the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. Now, could somebody, in the same way that they could compose a song in stereo in their home studio and then bring it to you as a producer and a mixer, and you could sort of take it to the next level with nicer speakers in your space, and in the way that could even happen remotely.
Yep.
Is that possible in the Atmos world?
Absolutely it is. When Atmos first came out, it was time for the industry to sell a lot of stuff. And hey, guilty, right? So, but it was the one thing that I never fully got on board with was this idea that everybody, if you weren't working in a mastering level PMC or Lipinski or Atom or Genelec room, you can't participate. I never liked it. I still don't like it. Because when we look at the world of music making, and music equals stereo, right? We just describe stereo as music.
Right.
Well, if you're a composer and you're at home and you got a pair of headphones, you could absolutely write the best song that's ever been written. Nothing's stopping that from happening, right? Now, does that mean that you will necessarily be able to mix it the best? Maybe. There's certainly some barriers to you to be able to do that. Does that mean you'll be able to deliver a world-class master that translates to the whole world? Very small chance. And that's why there's this ecosystem. That's why we have composers and players and editors and mixers and mastering engineers and everybody in between. And that lineage and that sort of system, it's tried and tested. It's been designed for music making now for, the entirety of the commercial music industry. So the idea that suddenly we just jump to 11 speakers and everybody can do everything, and if you don't have it, you can't participate, is total BS to me. I think that it's a wicked idea. You've now made me aware of our mutual language. I think it's a great idea for somebody to approach this and say, okay, I want to compose or make some music that I think is going to be really cool in spatial audio. And then track it and use binaural or use whatever technology is going to help you sort of, go as far as you can go. And then work with a producer or a mix engineer and say, okay, here's what I was envisioning. Sit with them. Do it. You might even find you're like, oh, okay, I want to go back and track a couple more things now that I'm hearing it in this space. Yeah. That's production. And then that
now,
makes
could you?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, if you were dialing in an Atmos mix in your studio, can you actually feed a binaural render, stream it to somebody who's back in theirs with the headphones? So perhaps they composed something in headphones and they thought they liked it. Now you're dialing in things a little different. And they're like, "Ooh, that's cool. I didn't know. That's better. I love it."
So I
had that kind of experience.
Yeah, and more times than I can count now. But I'll go back to story time. There's an artist named Jonathan Kawchuk, and on my playlist, his record is there. It's called Every When. So Jonathan is a Canadian artist and composer. He started writing a record for 11 channels, 7.1.4, and he's got a whole background in spatial recording and way prior to Atmos. Really deep guy. He composed this record and recorded this record for 11 channels only in headphones using sound particles as his sort of main DAW and Reaper. He only ever heard it that way for its entirety. And this is a wild record. I won't even, just go listen to it. It's a special record. Then around, I can't remember the exact year, but around when I was like sort of set up and I was connected with Dolby as one of the first sort of studios, he contacted Dolby and said, hey, Atmos is happening for music. This is like, I need this. I made a record and I have no way to share it with anybody. And Dolby put him and I in touch. We start working on the record. He's in British Columbia, which is like LA to New York distance.
Mm-hmm.
And we did this. So he sent me all of his files, and we're talking hundreds and hundreds of files with very specific ideas. I mix it. I'm sending him a binaural over audio movers. So this is, it took us a couple of years before we really got this thing going. Then the pandemic hits. And since Apple takes it on, we're like, oh, wait, we should finish this thing. So we mixed the entire record with him listening on binaural in British Columbia and me being in my studio and just putting Zoom on the side so we could like see each other. Amazing. And then the first time, like this is a guy who's been working on this for 6 years, only in headphones. And I'm telling you, when you hear it, it is still to this day, one of the wildest things I've ever worked on in the format. This record, he didn't get to hear it on speakers until 6 years later from when he started writing and recording it. And he got to hear it and it's like, it was like, this is it. We didn't even do notes after that.
That's amazing. Give us the name of the artist one more time so that we can go.
Yeah, his name is Jonathan Kawchuk, and the album is called Everywhen. It is a wild experimental record. There's sounds like he went into the Rocky Mountains and recorded nature sounds with 11 microphones. He took impulse responses of the Rocky Mountains and then applied those impulse responses, those 11 channel IRs, to each of the vocal layers. I mean, this is some wild stuff. So before its time, like realistically. Yeah. And so I learned, even just doing it, every time he'd tell me something, I was like, whoa, I'm like supposed to mix the thing. When we released that record, which was just as soon as COVID calmed down, he came to Toronto. We actually released that record in a movie theater with the screen off. And I brought a whole bunch of folks in Toronto, and we all turned the screen off in the movie theater and listened to it. At that time, we didn't have the money to do a cinematic version, so I actually learned how to hack into a cinema renderer with a Blu-ray player and just played the Blu-ray that we burned ourselves. Wow. And played it back on the cinema. And we had a whole record release party with the screen off in a movie theater. I mean, so it's like all of that started in headphones. And so anybody who thinks, you know what I mean? Like, if that's not proof of the situation, I don't know what is.
That's right. That's really great. What a great concept. And I've thought about that too. I've spoken with people here about how cool it would be to have events or a club or something where people come in and all you do is just get people together to listen to a great immersive mix. Because my experience of doing that at NAMM, for example, with Andrew Sheps and Chad Blake playing their stuff, or in the Audio Atmos room at AES, it's a really incredible experience. So I'm excited for everybody who hasn't had a chance to do that yet to start exploring Atmos. So Justin, I think we've come to the end of our awesome interview with you, but I've got one more closing question I'd love to ask you that I like to ask all our guests, and it's a hypothetical question, and it's one where you get to go back in time, take the Wayback Studio machine and go find young Justin and say, listen, dude, you tap yourself on the shoulder, although you might freak out because you're probably in headphones surrounded by 14 speakers and you go like, what was that? But there you are, you tap yourself on the shoulder and you say, hey, dude, I've come back to give you this one bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing that you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day. It's a long-ass question, but what advice would you like to go back and give yourself if you could?
I would say for myself personally, because I do so many different things as a player and as an engineer and as a producer and a mix engineer and a mastering engineer, is to stop worrying about what you think other people think about you. Mm-hmm. Because I definitely struggled for a great length of time with like just my own sort of musical identity of like, what do I do? Who am I? You know, should I be a bassist to these people and a mix engineer to these people and a producer? You know what I mean? And I think that it held me back from actually just eventually I feel much more at, you know, I guess it just feels much more natural now where it's like, that's just who I am. I like being involved in music in all of these different ways. And if anything, I would say that a couple of years ago when I really was able to sort of work on that, it helped me to make this record, which is a reflection of so many different aspects of the musicality. So, yeah, and that would be the first one that comes to mind.
That's great, man. I love that answer. And I think that's a really great bit of advice to all of us. I feel like I'm taking that to heart just hearing you say it.
Right on.
I'm reminded, because I think we do. We wear a lot more hats than we give ourselves credit for. And it's okay to mix them all up, you know, and let everybody know this is the whole version of us.
Yeah. I mean, at least the fact is that we don't really have a choice, right? Like that's who we are. Right. So yeah, I'm enjoying sort of embracing that and having the chance, but it takes time. That's, I think, the challenge with it is that, you know, we're in such a fast-paced world where everything is supposed to be, you know, perfect now, immediately, but it takes time. It takes time for all of those skills to sort of synthesize and sort of come together. And so a little bit of patience and being ourselves, and I think some pretty cool stuff can happen.
That's awesome. Well, so let's say the Rockstars would like to check out more about you. What if they're curious about working with you, or if they're looking for a recommendation for somebody to work with? How could they find you? Where would you like them to reach out and connect with you if they want to?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, social media is there. So Instagram being @JustinGraySound would be the tag. And similarly, from an educational standpoint of learning on YouTube, I do release a lot of stuff. And around this record, by the time this is out, there should be actually quite a lot of more new educational content. But if you go to justingraysound.com, there's, you know, a contact page, and you also have a chance to check out the work in stereo and in Atmos and 360, etc. And then there's a contact page there if you want to reach out anytime on any of those platforms. I do my best to reach back as fast as possible.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, dude. And Rockstars, thank you so much for watching this. Please remember to subscribe and like this video if you enjoyed this. And if you have any comments or questions, just drop them in the comment there and I'll jump in to answer them. And if it's a question for Justin and he sees it, you never know, he might jump in and answer it, or I might, you know, send him a text and go, hey dude, you got a great question.
I love it. Well, thank you. Rock on.
Dude, it's great to see you, man. Thanks so much for doing this with us. And I look forward to seeing you around the studio, man.
Thanks, Lidge.
All right, dude. Cheers. Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our awesome sponsors who help make this episode possible: Isotope, Native Instruments, Atom Audio, and SAE Institute Nashville. And remember to take advantage of our special coupon codes at isotope.com, nativeinstruments.com. Use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plugin purchase. If you enjoyed Recording Studio Rockstars, please check out our sponsors using the links in the show notes. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. And please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, because it's a great way to help support this show. And leave us a comment below to let us know what you thought of this interview or who we should have on as a guest in the future. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars. Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko, and Liz Hulitskaya. Thanks so much for watching and listening, Rockstars, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.